Welcome everybody to Straight Shoot here on YouTube, and if you've clicked on this video, it's because you want to know what our top 5 Hell in a Cell matches of all time are. Before we get started, Steve, how are you?
Hey, fantastic, buddy. How are you? Once again, welcome back from vacation, and let's just dive into this because Hell in a Cell is right around the corner, and you and I have always had this disconnect because we grew up in two different eras. I was in the era of the attitude, the spot fest, the violence, the vulgar, Mick Foley nearly dying, and you grew up in kind of a different era with different matches. So I feel our picks and the way this is going to work is kind of different, and there's going to be some controversy.
Yes, I hate the way you said controversy. I hate that. That being said, let me explain to everybody what we have done. So I have come up with a top 5 list, and I've ranked them 1 through 5. Steve came up with a top 5 list, and he ranked his from 1 through 5. I have now taken those 10 matches or 10 selections. Through weighted average, I have created a definitive top 5 Hell in a Cell matches brought to you by Straight Shoot. Now, that being said, let's talk about some honorable mentions real quick that did not make the list based on weighted average. One of those being yours, Steve, your number 5. Kurt Angle versus Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock versus Rikishi versus The Undertaker. Give me a quick 20-second spiel as to why you love that match.
Honestly, Armageddon 2000, absolute spot fest. All pretty much Hall of Famers. Well, no, all Hall of Famers in this match, and just how can you not put those 5 guys in a match and not have pure gold? It was fantastic. It was a great spot fest. Kishi going off into that truck full of hay and a big mattress. Honestly, it was great. I loved it, and it was just one of those ones that deserved to be there.
Yeah, it was beautiful chaos. It was absolutely beautiful chaos. My number 5 didn't make it either, though, and that is, and again, we're gonna start to see a trend with the matches that I pick because they're from all very similar eras. Triple H versus Shawn Michaels, Bad Blood 2004. The reason I have this match is because this was the blow-off match to the feud of this era. This was the feud of the Ruthless Aggression era. You can bring up John Cena into the conversation of Ruthless Aggression, Brock Lesnar, but really the feud of the Ruthless Aggression era was Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. This was the end of it. My biggest downside of this match is that it's nearly 50 minutes long, Steve. It's a lot. And the only other downside is, especially if you were a fan at the time, this was the 10th time we'd gotten Shawn Michaels versus Triple H. That being said, it was bloody, it was nasty, it was what Hell in a Cell needs to be. It's what Hell in a Cell is no longer, and I miss those days. So yeah, I had Triple H versus Shawn Michaels in my number 5. Now your number 4 made it, and my number 4 made it, and I believe from here on out, all of our picks made the weighted top 5 with the exception of our 5th pick. So we're gonna get into our top 5, and we're going to start at number 5, Steve. Based on our weighted average, we have selected, and I know it wasn't on your list, so I actually pushed this one into the top 5 based on my placement. Sasha Banks versus Charlotte Flair at a Hell in a Cell 2016. You were not a huge fan of me putting this on my list, and I'm curious as to why.
First off, I will say my one pick for the actual women's match did not make the list, and I actually picked Sasha Banks versus Bayley. I thought that was a much better match, but we're going to talk about Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair. What was it? Hell in a Cell
2016.
2016. My biggest vice with this match is I felt it was a botch fest. There was just so much. It was so hectic. And with them setting up the table in the back right corner, Charlotte trying to get into the figure 8 with Sasha, like still trying to reach the chair and not really being able to get it. And then tapping. It wasn't even like hitting Charlotte. Like, if you're gonna hit her, hit her. And she's like tapping her while they're in that figure eight. It was just messy and it was sloppy. And don't get me wrong, credit to both women for doing this match because it is so violent and it takes its toll on you. But honestly, I'm not over on it. It's a great match, but I wasn't sold on it.
Too bad, Steve, because I got it into the top 5, baby, because I actually had it as my number 4, and that was enough to, based on weighted average, to bring it into our cumulative top 5. I love this match because you never forget your first. The first ever women's Hell in a Cell match. These two, in that year, 2016, they were the real women's revolution. They are the ones that trailblazed the path for women's wrestling into what it is today. Don't let people trick you into thinking it was the Bella Twins. It was these two pioneering and taking women's wrestling to a place where only men were allowed to go. We even had a Shawn Michaels Undertaker-like spot where they were on the side of the cell and Charlotte dragged down Sasha Banks to go through the table. I personally really enjoyed this match. Also, to me, the fact that is such a historical moment in women's wrestling also gives it some additional points on my end. I think it's worth a rewatch. Steve, if you haven't watched it in a while, I do believe that it is a great match. And for those that haven't seen it, this is a great example of how women can be allowed and should be allowed to do some of the wild things that men are allowed to do in professional wrestling. But I digress. Number 4, based on our weighted average, is a tie. So we both get to talk here, Steve, because you had The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at Bad Blood 1997. And tell me that my pick doesn't show our generational divide, because I picked The Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar at No Mercy 2002. What do you have to say?
Honestly, I want you to go first on this, because if I'm right, this match that I chose was the first Hell in a Cell. I do believe this was the first. It was the concept that was made a couple of months earlier by The Undertaker for this match. But I want you to go first. Tell me why your match is better than the original, because what you just said is you never forget your first. And this is the first.
Yeah, I particularly love this match because of just how great of a chemistry Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker had in 2002. I mean, they had it for a really long time, this chemistry. Now, mind you, The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, that's chemistry 101. But we had an established veteran going up against the young lion coming in to take his throne. We remember Roman Reigns trying to take the yard, becoming the big dog. This was really the first time that we had somebody challenging The Undertaker for that throne of the big dog in the yard. I love this match because of its brutality, its creativity, the use of Paul Heyman taking some nasty bumps in the cell, and also the place of this particular match within a feud, which is, again, something we don't get these days. Guys are just getting tossed in the cell with no buildup or feud. These guys had a phenomenal buildup to Hell in a Cell, to the point where back then, Stephanie McMahon being the general manager of SmackDown, this was the only place where these two could be contained. Right? The Hell in a Cell was the only thing that could keep The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar from destroying the entire arena. And you believed it because both of these guys were monsters, behemoths, and legitimate threats to anybody's bodily being. So, as a match, it's fantastic. The believability of it as well is fantastic. That is something that I believe is missing, has always been missing between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, because if you want to get realistic, The Undertaker is going to win that match 10 out of 10 times. But Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker, believable.
Fair enough. And you made a lot of fantastic points for what that match needed and who the two people in the match were, yes, absolutely, they needed to sell. They've had great chemistry. We've always seen that feud between them. I agree. But
There it is. But
but like you just said, and I'll steal your line, you never forget your first. We go back to, I believe the pay-per-view back then was, correct me if I'm wrong, Ground Zero. And it was, what was it? Bret Hart and Taker for the world title,
maybe.
I believe. And I believe Shawn cost Taker the world title because of his feud with Bret. And from there, the concept of Hell in a Cell was created by The Undertaker. Now, going into In Your House, Bad Blood, these two, Shawn Michaels played the terrified kid so well with this, and Taker just being the phenom that he was back then. And he was off on his own, like, because this is shortly after the separation from Paul Bearer, which we then saw why in this match. But the overall match itself was violent. It was vicious. The cell door ended up getting busted open, and then all of a sudden the lights go black, and we see Paul Bearer walk out with Kane, the Undertaker's apparently dead, burnt younger brother, and he comes out and costs Undertaker the very first ever Hell in a Cell match. This led to the three future Hall of Famers in this match, well, including Paul Bearer, 4, literally paving their paths from this match. This match is an iconic staple for all 3 of those men. And honestly, like, if it wasn't for this match, you never know where these things could have gone. This, like, Hell in a Cell would never have been a thing if it wasn't for The Undertaker and this very feud. So at the end of the day, I personally think it should be higher up on the list. But I digress. It is where it is, but it is nowhere near as close to as good as, Brock Taker is nowhere near as close to as good as the first ever Hell in a Cell.
I don't know. You said it needs to be higher than number 3, but that's where you had it on your list. So hypocrite. Number 2, we have Trip. And we agreed on this one, actually. And it's both in oh, no, excuse me. No, we're at a number 3, excuse me.
Yes,
before it was a tie at
number
number 4. And number 3, we have one of yours. You actually had this one on number 2 on your list. And I didn't have it on my list, which I think is going to cause some head turning. So I'm going to let you have the floor here. The Undertaker versus Mick Foley at King of the Ring 1998.
You call yourself a wrestling fan.
It's not okay. Listen, it's
no. Let me finish.
You can't say something like that and not let me defend myself.
You can let me finish first, and then you can defend yourself. I'm putting my foot down as the heel in this. You're a heel at this point. You call yourself a wrestling fan, and literally the match that put Mick Foley into the upper echelon of what he is now. Forget his indie days. Forget all the stuff he did before this. This is the match Mick Foley is forever going to be remembered for. And you didn't have it on your list?
Yes, because
you know what, Santi? You know what happens to people that don't put this on their list? You just made the list.
Listen, this isn't a match. This is just 2 spots. It is 2 spots, Steve. One of them which wasn't supposed to happen. It was a complete accident. This is 2 spots. This is not a match. This is 2 spots, for God's sake. Falling off the cell and then going through the cell.
He went up twice.
This is just a spot fest. This is not a match. This is seen with rose-tinted glasses, and people remember the Mick Foley spots. People don't remember The Undertaker versus Mick Foley as a match. I'm sorry. You don't ever see highlights of anything else aside from what Mick Foley did. This is legendary and iconic for the bumps that Mick Foley took, not because it's a good match, because it wasn't. This wasn't a match, Steve.
Who are the two greatest commentators of all time?
Me and you.
Next to us.
Jim Ross and
Partnership.
And Jerry the King
Jerry
Lawler.
the King Lawler.
Okay.
And would they still be, without this match, as remembered?
Sure.
You can't add. No.
Sure.
Not at all.
Sure.
The greatest called match is this match right here. Not because, oh my God, he killed him, but you are so. You said it about Jerry the King Lawler and underrated, overrated the other day, saying he had the perfect timing for the perfect cheap quit. And they were in this match as well. Everything surrounding this match is
this
iconic. Iconic.
The spots were iconic. The couple of bumps were iconic. This wasn't a match, Steve.
You're gonna get ruined in the comments. Anyways,
this wasn't a match. This was just a giant spot fest. Great spots, but this is not a match.
I think Santi just went heel.
All right, at number 2, one that we can agree with. I had it higher on the list than you. We have Triple H versus Cactus Jack at No Way Out 2000. Would you like me to take this?
Go ahead, since
sure.
Yeah.
The reason I love this match, Steve, is because this was the coming out party of Triple H. Triple H was a main eventer, but was he at this point a serious main eventer, by the way, that people could see as the face of the company, that people could see as being up there with Shawn and The Rock, right? The conversation was never not Shawn and The Rock, Austin and The Rock at the time. He wasn't until Mick Foley came along and made this son of a bitch a man by putting him through one of the most painful, rigorous matches I've ever seen. It had everything. It had sledgehammers. It had barbed wire. It had somebody going through a cell safely, might I add, because to me, that's very important that the wrestler does not get hurt, because Steve, you seem to apparently glorify that with your Mick Foley pick previously. But this match made Triple H into the cerebral assassin, the one that is not afraid to end your freaking career. That is not what we had before this. Before this, he was Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He was the fun guy in DX. This is the birth of the game, the cerebral assassin. If you want to talk about a match that left a true lasting legacy, not just your spot fest that's good on a highlight reel like the Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, this is it. This is a match that changed the landscape of professional wrestling for the next 20 years.
Okay, so this wasn't a spot fest.
Yes, it was a spot fest, but nowhere near. It was a more cohesive spot fest. It was actually a match. There were things that were properly choreographed. They were actually in the ring for a significant amount of time. There didn't involve somebody losing half of their lifespan in this match. Okay, this is why I love this match, because we got the spot fest, we got their in-ring psychology, and no one had to lose 50 years of their life.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take it from there. You were 5 years old when this match happened. Okay, first off, I remember this clearly.
First of all, I was 7.
Whatever. I had at least hit puberty.
Oh, but anyway, you.
And for this match, I wasn't just looking at Stephanie McMahon as the valet. I was actually watching the match happen. And I will agree, Hell in a Cells are predominantly, back then, a spot fest. But this was, I will agree, in a sense, that this was... It was incredible. But it was not what the Shawn, or sorry, the Mick Foley Taker match was the year prior. Now, just remember, you got to look at the storyline with this match coming in. Mick Foley had Mankind had just been fired. and they did the swerve with him coming back as Cactus Jack for this. My favorite part of this match was the fear of God that Mick Foley put on Hunter's face when he lit that barbed wire 2x4.
Barbie.
When he lit Barbie on fire, I remember seeing Hunter's face or soul leave his body. And he was like, I'm in for something. I need to find that next level. And this is where that game persona finally gave itself a true name. Yes, I love the death matches. Yes, I love, people going to the nth degree to really give them or put themselves over. And Mick Foley didn't need to do that in this match. It was Hunter who did need to carry this and prove himself. It's not like Mick Foley's return against Edge, where Mick Foley needed that match more than Edge did. You know what I mean? And I know that's not a Hell in a Cell, but was it a Hell in a Cell?
No, it was Street Fight.
No, it was Street Fight, yeah. But what I'm saying is here, Hunter needed this more than Mick. Mick needed the Taker match the year prior more than Taker. You know what I mean? So it's who really needs the culmination, the victory in this match, and who needs to really take their career to the next level. You are correct. Hunter did have his coming out party in this match, but in no means at all is it better than the match I was speaking about, but it was still a phenomenal match all in all. Didn't Stephanie sneak a sledgehammer through the cage in that match?
Oh yeah, dude, everything was in that match. We had everything.
It was great.
We had everything in that match. Well, Steve, this weighted average score speaks for all of Straight Shoot, so this is better than The Undertaker versus Mick Foley, according to the weighted average. Respect the weighted average, because now we are at number one, the one where we seem to actually agree. We have The Undertaker versus Triple H at WrestleMania 28 with Shawn Michaels as special guest referee. Go ahead, Steve.
Didn't you put this at number 2 on your list?
I did put this at number 2, but I'm okay with this being number 1. My number 1 was Triple H versus Cactus.
Okay, I'm just making sure that everyone knows that you put this at number 2 and I put this at number 1.
Steve, unlike you, I respect the weighted average.
I don't. I somewhat respect the comments unless there's a bunch of marks in there, so. But anyways, you can lead on this,
sure,
Sandy, because this you've actually said is one of the greatest matches of all time.
I do genuinely believe this. I'm somebody that isn't wowed by just simply spots. I've never been wowed by spots. This is why I like ECW, but I've never been so over on ECW, because I think a lot of ECW was a lot of spots. And yep. I think there's a place for spot fest in professional wrestling, but a spot fest will never for me be in the discussion for greatest match of all time. So let me first preface that. This was not a spot fest. What I love out of professional wrestling is when it's able to tell a story that I give a fuck about. Mm-hmm. And this has been the story, the match that I've personally given the most F's about in a very long time. I have yet to find a match that's come on after this that I've been as invested as we had Triple H going after the streak for his third and final attempt against The Undertaker with Shawn Michaels in there. And this really did mark the end of an era. Many of us at this moment in time saw this as the swan song of the Attitude Era. At this point in time, we had already lost Stone Cold. We were about, in theory, to lose The Rock to his potentially once-in-a-lifetime final match with John Cena at the time. We were losing, I guess, Triple H and losing Shawn Michaels as full-time athletes. This was a beautiful story put into a beautifully choreographed 35-minute match that I have nothing bad to say about. The cell was not overused. It was used enough. The violence was a lot, but not too much. The moments where they're talking at each other, there was a lot of it, but not too much. Everything. If you're talking about baking a cake, this had all of the perfect ingredients and the exact amount of ingredients to give us what I believe is the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, because I've said that before.
Yeah, honestly, I think you wrote that very poetically, because it's a great segue for me to come in, because for me, you're not a spot fest guy. My biggest thing is the story. It always has been. There always has to be a significant build, and what is more significant than these three competitors and the story between the three of them?
Mm-hmm.
Taker retiring Shawn and Hunter, and as their best friends slash basically brothers, love you, hate you relationship over a 20-year span. Taker Hunter, like as the Taker is American badass, Hunter as Triple H, then the Game, then the Cerebral Assassin, and every other single name you can give this man. These three had always been intertwined with each other, even with the Montreal Screwjob. Taker was technically at the beck and call, just in case, So these three will always go down in infamy together. On the match itself, you are right. The cell didn't need to be used a lot. It was used enough, and it was almost just like containing almost like a nuclear explosion. That's the only reason that the cell was there. Very much like you said earlier, Brock and Taker in there, I believe that was 01, 02, 02. You've got now those two. It's an explosion about that need to be concealed. And don't get me wrong, I don't think they're going to be running around New Jersey at their ages, beating the crap out of each other. But what this match was just the culmination of decades of work, and very good work. The one that you and I always talk about is the sweet chin music into the pedigree, and the very quick count by Shawn. It wasn't over quick, but it was quick enough. And we're like, whoa, streak's over. And like that slip out 2 count, and everyone in the arena. I remember watching that back crowd in the replay. It's almost like watching a soccer goal or something. Like you watch the goal and then you watch how the crowd reacts. I watched that crowd react, and it was a wave jumping out of their seats for the ones that weren't sitting. And you're like, what do they need to do to beat this man? You almost felt he was immortal. So I agree. One of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. Yes, greatest Hell in a Cell match of all time. Yeah, because going completely against everything I've said today, it wasn't a spot fest. It was a beautiful build. It was a novel written over many, many years that culminated in virtually something perfect.
Steve, let me put this analogy out there to the Marvel nerds. Okay. Triple H versus Shawn Michaels was the Hulk. Triple H versus the Undertaker at Mania 18 was Iron Man. The Triple H versus Shawn Michaels feud was Thor and Captain America. This was the Avengers. This was, like you said, the culmination of everything that happened in their 20-year span up until that point, coming together and being put into a nuclear white hot bomb that could only be contained by the Hell in a Cell.
Dude, it was the end game, and that's all it is, man. And that, I think that there's going to be a lot of comments and a lot of different opinions on this. and I honestly respect everyone's opinion on what matches you think
I
are.
don't. Our opinion is definitive.
We have God mode. We are inevitable.
Hey, we have a weighted average. We have math on our side.
If we're going with the Marvel comments, we are inevitable. Everything we say is inevitable, and it's right.
Yes,
So,
yes.
but no, honestly, that match was insane, and I'm happy with our top 5, even if the weighted average went against me. I'm happy with our top 5, guys. Let us know in the comments what you truly believe, and shoot on us because we'll shoot back.
Yeah, and we know that we have a younger audience too because we're fairly popular on TikTok. We, with the exception of Sasha Banks versus Charlotte Flair, we didn't have any matches from any Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. So if there's any matches from the last 7-8 years of Hell in a Cell pay-per-views that you love, because there are some very good ones, the Usos versus the New Day, CM Punk versus the Undertaker, CM Punk versus Shawn Michaels versus Alberto Del Rio. There's some good stuff. There are some good stuff. So
Moxley, Seth, Becky, Sasha.
So we'd love to hear if you have some more modern Hell in a Cell matches that you believe deserve some praise. Make sure to leave it in the comments. If you think either of us are idiots, I guess I should say, if you think Steve's an idiot, make sure to leave it in the comments. But Steve, any last words before I send this off here?
No, I think you just called me a stupid idiot way too many times, and I'm just gonna sit here and plug myself after you do.
All right. Well, folks, make sure to subscribe here to the YouTube channel and make sure to hit that bell to get those notifications. We are going to be pumping out a lot more opinion-based pieces like this that are only exclusively available here on YouTube. So that's why I'm saying subscribe. You can always change your mind. You can also find me over on the Straight Shoot TikTok, twitch.tv/SantiZap. And Steve, where can people find you?
Guys, you can find me over at the Straight Shoot TikTok. That is like one of our main TikToks. Santi has his other one, Mr. Santi Zap. And mine is Mr. Tesh. Go find us over there. I am hopefully getting off my live ban soon. Santi didn't know about that. And find me on twitch.tv/Mr. Tesh.
Later, everybody.